Well, it's my real pleasure to have the opportunity today to be speaking with Scott Hamilton, who is the CEO of Live Data. We just had an essay that Scott published on the data grid that we put out on Dash Media yesterday. And so I thought it'd be a great opportunity to actually have a live visit because I thought it was such a provocative essay that you wrote, Scott.
Thank
So
you.
first, to start off, what kind of prompted you to write this, the data grid, and what are you seeing in the marketplace that kind of gave you that vision?
It'll probably help if I put a little context around what it is that the data set that Live Data is aggregating, which will clearly start to drift into some of the unique complexities we have with bringing that to market, and then why the data grid concept was so important to us. Is that what Live Data does is we, for the most part, are tracking the overwhelming majority of the professional work class in the US, where they work, what their current jobs are, when they get promoted, when they change jobs. And on balance, we pick up about 2 million job signals on a monthly basis, either a promotion or a job change. So we're really good at determining where people are working, where they live, when they get promoted, and then just the general trends as that sort of manifests within a company or a sector. But it's an enormous data set. It's 100 million people and all of their full job history. And it's really, really interesting, but it's complex to deal with. So most of the people that we work with are very large organizations who will have data teams and data scientists and various instances in the cloud providers. And that's great, but there's so many other interesting little bits and pieces that could be gleaned out of that data if it were just more accessible. I find it very hard to believe that my data set is the only one that is cumbersome and clumsy and difficult to work with. So the motivation for this piece was, how do we make data, wherever it resides and whoever has collected it, just generally more accessible? Now, why is that important? Because data is the next class of information once it gets in the hands of the people who can start to test their intuitions and test their hypotheses. The foundational models, OpenAI, Claude, Gemini, and all of the others that are DeepSeek, all of the others that are coming out, they're really good at taking the knowledge that's already been created, running it through all of those models, and then making it available to us to answer any question that we might have. But there's a whole class of information, new information, that's just waiting to be created when some analyst who's doing lean back type thinking and saying, you know what, if I took the inventory of widgets over here and start to relate that to the supply of the input to widgets, and then related that to growing trends that I'm seeing in the labor force and in the real estate sector, I wonder if something interesting will come from that. So I believe, as all of us who long-winded answered your question, Michael, is that all of us who are looking for new sets of information to be created have to be thinking about how data becomes more accessible to analysts. So I'll pause there and see if it was even close to answering your question.
Well, I think it was an important backdrop, and so the bottom line, and you and I've got to know each other over the last few years. Live data information, in terms of the flow of human capital, I've just found fascinating. We've obviously published some of that information on the Dash Media website, but I think this kind of evolution, what does this all mean? As you're in a world of infobesity, there's so much information. But how do you create insights? And that's this ability to tap into specific data that's relevant. You said kind of connect dots. And as you think about these large language models, they're fabulous, but effectively that kind of knowledge becomes a commodity, right? So this knowledge arbitrage that you discussed, which used to be highly valuable. I mean, if you could just get a little bit of an arbitrage, you could leverage that, into significant opportunity. That's gone. And so
it's certainly gone and or rapidly disappearing. And I think for the most part, that is a net positive for us all. It's an interesting, economists have always had that principle of perfect information. Imagine a world where everyone knew everything. Nobody could take, prices would be efficient, and that suppliers and those who demanded the product, we'd have that pure equilibrium fantasy that exists only in economic models. but we're actually we're getting closer to that when just about everybody's going to know the same thing. And a lot of the people I know, a lot of the people probably you know as well, have taken advantage of the fact, taken advantage is probably too strong of words, have benefited from, might be a better way to phrase it, from their insights into something that was just not available to us. And then they were compensated handsomely for that knowledge. Well, I'm going to be able to have the same sort of tax insights or financial planning insights through a model that I used to have to pay a premium for from somebody who might be working from the more prominent firms. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how sort of organizations reshape themselves. Getting back to sort of our data, Michael, is that we've already seen that in the professional forces with the management consultants that had a fabulous time growing up until about 2022, when you can start to see from McKinsey, Bain, and BCG, they've all shed anywhere from 7 to 12% of their workforce in 2 years. They're not growing anymore. And I think they have seen the writing on the wall that it's not so much how do they price their exclusive access to knowledge as much as how do they help their client base take advantage of some of these great foundational model breakthroughs and apply them to their industries. But that's just going to mean fewer people.
Right. So as you make the analog between, in the world that, we're in and have come from, we had the power grid and how people tapped into that. Carry that forward to how you see the data grid emerging and how will
Yeah.
people utilize that?
Yeah, well, full disclosure, it's more of a goal of mine. I don't think it really exists yet. There are some closed networks of it that I can speak to in a second, but the ideal would be is that when I'm an analyst, let's take it real down to the base level. Let's just say I'm working in Google Sheets or Excel, and I'm trying to, for whatever reason I'm trying to build an equation. The equation would require that I have my data, the workforce of OpenAI, and the growth of the engineers who are practicing AI. And then I would need an estimate of salary that I could get from salary.com. And then I might want to know home prices in Portland, Austin, and Silicon Valley. I'd need to go to another data set to get that. So we've got staffing size, we've got the role, we have salary, and we have real estate prices, because maybe I'm trying to model what a real estate demand might be. Right now, I would have to have access to 4 different data sets. I have to go to live data and get access to their workforce data and their role data. Then I'd have to go to salary.com and cut some sort of a deal so that I could have information on salary at the role and company level. And then I'd have to go over to Zillow or realtor.com and start to get access to home price data. For those who are accustomed to working in Sheets, where you can kind of invoke a equation, equal sign, whatever function you're trying to build, it would be really great if I could just invoke commands that would allow me to go out and get the appropriate data set that's going to help me build my model. But right now, the friction would be is I've got to go and cut deals with every single one of those vendors just so I can start testing ideas, most of which, by the way, will never lead to anything. So there's just inherently friction from the person who wants to do the hypotheses exploration and the data that will make that exploration possible. And to the extent there could be an open access in some way that would have to be metered, that would have to be priced, where everyone's intellectual rights would be honored, to where I could just have access to that in the same way in which I'm pulling energy down from the energy grid. If I need workforce data, great. The infrastructure knows that you can get that from live data. If I need real estate data, great. The infrastructure knows you can pull that down from Zillow or realtor.com, and so on and so forth. So it's fantasy right now. I believe everyone thinks we're going to get to that, but it's a lot of changing of behavior and business models that have to happen before we can get to that world. And frankly, that's far bigger than just live data. I don't even know all of the stakeholders that would have to change behavior to accommodate that, but I'm pretty confident that we're going to end up there at some point.
Yeah, and I think the way that I'd envision that working is, you have these kind of early pioneers, but once you kind of cross the chasm and it goes from, do I participate or don't I participate, or I keep myself proprietary, all of a sudden, if I'm not part of this, I'm basically left behind. Or at least that's how I think it could go. And if in a window, which is I think it'll be looked at as a very primitive window in the future, you look at Perplexity today, and they kind of almost create this open window to where they're pulling all this stuff from. So
Yeah.
you as the
Yeah.
user, all of a sudden are starting to get some appreciation for kind of like, okay, these are the different sources that they're pulling from to get you the answer you want. Ultimately, just like the power grid, I don't care where they're getting the energy. I just want my lights to go on, or I just want to be able to solve whatever I'm trying to do. And it's got to be invisible, ubiquitous, and I don't want to think about it. I just want it to happen. And I think that's what the kind of the vision that you outline where this ultimately has to go.
And that's sort of the interesting dynamic here, and it's sort of classic game theory. Is that right now those who have information benefit from the exclusivity of it. Is that or have data? I know you need it. I always try to value price it. I say, what's this guy going to do with this? I mean, is he going to create some great, brilliant insight? I'm going to sell it to you for more expensive. Is this more expensive price? If this other guy is just going to use it to write a news article, whatever, I'm going to sell him at a lower price. And really, what has to happen is like simply a unit of energy, a kilowatt of energy. The electric company doesn't care if you're fabricating AI chips or if you're just grinding out widgets. Everybody's going to pay the same sort of price. And we don't know who's going to be first in sort of creating this new world of data model, but probably everybody's going to be lining up to be second, because once somebody starts that, I believe that everyone else is just going to have to fall in line. I don't think we have an infrastructure challenge right now. There are models that could track this and price it and guarantee the provenance of data ownership. We have a dynamic that is, do the business partners, does the business constituency want to do business in this manner? So again, that's why I come back to, I think it's a question of when, not if.
I completely agree. Talk about what's a knowledge explorer, and what is sort of what do you see that being in the future and the value that it's creating?
In the piece I wrote, I contrasted this with the sort of the knowledge arbitrage community, and which creates a lot of value for themselves right now and their companies, to where I think the next generation of knowledge workers will make their income, and that's through the knowledge exploration. Let's start with the knowledge arbitrage. And that gets back to the concept I was speaking of earlier, where people benefit from the access to the knowledge that they have that we don't. A tax accountant, a financial planner, a management consultant. They've spent a lot of time and energy training themselves, acquiring their insights, and I have to pay them when I need it for some problem or circumstance or situation that I find myself in. It's certainly a general consensus that the foundational AI models out there are getting us really, really close to having access to that skill set knowledge with a simple prompt. I can now ask questions that of any of these models and get something that's going to be 95% as good as that if I went to any one of these prominent firms and asked them the same sort of question. So that margin that the knowledge arbitrageurs get is disappearing. But now we've moved into that world where, all right, how does something become knowledge? How does something become information? Well, with all of the data that is being aggregated down to the most granular level in every single industry, in every single sector that we could possibly imagine, that's just all sort of sitting out there, waiting for the knowledge explorer, the person who has an intuition and a notion and a concept and an idea that is, I wonder if I related this data element to that data element and then tested it against this other set of data elements, would I find something that is interesting, something that is novel? And it's kind of analogous to, I think it's analogous to what drug researchers do and pharmaceutical researchers do. They test a whole bunch of different compounds to wonder if they can create the new miracle drug, which would ultimately be a perfect new set of information that is a function of all of these different molecules and elements. I believe that same sort of paradigm exists in all of the disparate data sets that are sitting out there right now. And it's waiting for people who have notions. Gosh knows where those notions come from, but they come from all of us in our individual perspectives, the ways in which we view the world, that will say, I'm going to test these 3 or 4 or 5 or X number of different elements, data sets together, and see if I can get what I'm looking for. And it's really hard to do that right now because all of those data sets sit in a variety of different places with a variety of different contracts that are associated with them, with a variety of different permissions and use rights associated with it. And the knowledge explorers in the vision that I have would have greater access to each of these data sets so that they can do what they're great at, and which humans will always be better at than machines, which is intuition and hypothesis testing.
If you made the analog, you looked at, when the internet effectively became commercialized, it was really the web browser and the Netscape navigator, and then you had the Microsoft Explorer, and now you have Safari and Chrome. But basically, what was really valuable, Netscape at one point had like a $7 billion market cap. Basically that's all been commoditized to, wildly important, but we commoditized to where nobody's paying for it. And you look at these large language models, which are incredibly cool and vital to be developing these applications or opportunities where this was all going. But does it seem like that is going to be effectively commoditized? Do you feel like the OpenAIs of the world and the Claudes of the world, does that become commoditized, and therefore OpenAI with a $300 billion market value with the last financing, it seems kind of vulnerable? What's just sort of your reaction to that piece of where this is going?
I believe what is going to be commoditized, if it's even properly referred to as a commodity at that point, is perfect information. That at any given time, any of us will be able to have almost immediate access to a common truth. And if that's brought to us by the OpenAIs, the DeepSeeks, the Anthropics, I don't know. But the world, through any sort of consumer type product, the world has demonstrated that for the most part, we like at least a couple choices. So I don't believe OpenAI is going to be able to differentiate itself from any of the other foundational models with unique insights. So I believe in a sense that, yes, it's going to be commoditized. Their various go-to-markets, how they integrate into the world, habits will dictate the ones that users might prefer. Integrations into other data sets might also be a tell. But you still have to, if we view them like tools, you still have to learn how to use them well. And the analogy I often sort of tell is that I could, the carpenters or tradesmen that might be doing a renovation at my house, I can observe the tools that they're using, and I can go buy them at Home Depot. I can have the exact same tool set that these guys might have who are building an addition onto my house. Doesn't mean I'm going to be able to be a practitioner as good as they are at the craft. So I view that these models will bring us all access to everything just about when we need it, but it's still going to be up to us, the knowledge workers, the knowledge explorers, to put it all together into something that creates greater value.
My friend Mark Andreessen said that software is going to eat the world. We say that AI is its teeth, but ultimately humans decide what to eat. I think that's kind of what you're saying. It's how you use these tools in a way that creates the magic, which is so exciting, I think, in terms of what the opportunity is going to be.
Absolutely. I say to my team all the time, we'll know in about 5 to 10 years how fortunate we were to be living through these times. I don't think that the most creative person can really imagine what the professional class is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years. And we all have a choice. You're either frightened by it or you figure out how to embrace it, because of all of the cliches that have come along in my professional life, this really is different. This is so foundational and industry changing and sector changing and role changing. It's just exciting. I just feel so fortunate to be here right now and seeing it all happen before my eyes.
I agree 100%. I think the people that have that attitude and embrace this are going to be the ones that actually are the ones that kind of define the future and capture that opportunity. talk about live data more specifically. Again, we've talked about it, and you've talked about sort of how some of these pieces you imagine this data grid developing and how live data could be fit into that grid. But talk more about just how do you envision your business evolving and the constituents in it and what they're going to be benefiting or utilizing in terms of what you're able to provide for them.
So what, again, going back to what live data does is that it's our belief that human capital is, and particularly the movement of human capital, when people go into new roles or new companies or new cities, new sectors and industries, that's essentially a form of inside information. If I'm let me replay a little bit of history. We probably all remember Meta's, what I think they called it, Oculus, their big contraption that you would put on your head and you'd be in some alternative reality. Well, which by the way, they just sort of killed one group of that a couple weeks ago, but I'll get into that in a second. They started quietly hiring from Microsoft in bringing in people from Microsoft in their augmented reality, virtual reality team in about 2019. And if you were looking and observing the fact that why are all of these individuals with augmented reality and virtual reality, why is Meta hiring these people? And sure enough, a couple years later, after they were incubated within Meta starts to release their product for the augmented reality market. But it was messaged, it was indicated long before with the hiring of a particular skill set and talent. And so if you can follow those tracks, you can start to get some general idea of what a company might be thinking about. Looking at it from a slightly different level during the COVID episode is that anecdotally, we all knew people who were leaving San Francisco or Los Angeles and going to Portland or Boise or Austin. Well, I knew exactly who it was. I knew what industry it was. I knew what their roles were. I knew what probably their estimated income. We could track it down to a person and say, yes, there's a lot of people in the tech sector going here. There's a lot of people in this certain role going there. So none of us really dispute that the movement of people means a lot of different things to a lot of different verticals. Our task is just to try to be able to track that, to track it in a fashion that allows business planners to do the most mundane things like correct their CRM because you think that Larry works at Acme and he now works at Oracle. You should change that to the more interesting things like, we're seeing a lot of churn in the sales department at Salesforce. That can't be a good thing. And I'm long on Salesforce. I'm concerned about their earnings. I'm going to sell my shares. We believe that being able to capture the movement of human capital just helps a variety of industries in a variety of different ways. And our job is simply to capture that signal and then present it to anybody who finds it interesting for whatever business reason they are thinking about workforce dynamics.
Well, as you know, I violently agree with you in terms of the importance of that and what type of indicator that is. I mean, the flow of human capital has been, the immediate past, but it's certainly going to be the predictor of the future. I always said the greatest indicator of who's got something going on is see where the salespeople are going. The salespeople always had the nose. I mean, they like to go where they got the product that they can sell.
Yeah.
And so if you could see where the great salespeople or the salespeople flowing, you've got a great window to what's going to be happening next. So just kind of snapshot, any industries and or specific companies where you see a kind of a abnormal flow of talent going to right now? And are you seeing, and then the flip side of that, where are you seeing talent leave that maybe you wouldn't be necessarily obvious?
This is probably a question that's most interesting to think of from a role perspective, like the task that people are performing. Where we have really seen AI hit greatly at organizations is in a reduction of sort of the entry-level sales force, the people who are generally referred to as business development representatives or sales development representatives, BDRs, SDRs. Those are typically the younger kids just out of school and who are brought on by usually software companies who have a SaaS pricing model. And they're the ones that are just filling our email inboxes with, hey, would you like to try this particular product or service? it's really, really easy for machines to perform that task as well it is for humans. So that role has really taken a beating over the past couple of years. So the probably in the beyond the AI helping our engineering, all of our engineering teams write code more efficiently, the in the frontline dislocations associated with AI have really hit the sales teams most greatly. So that's been an interesting phenomenon where if you follow the data, you start to glean some sort of insights. And as far as sectors, it's been very interesting to see some of the EV manufacturers, Rivian and Tesla, who were pulling staff who'd long been at the marquee auto manufacturers, Ford, GM, Stellantis. So but that's been ongoing for quite a few years. One of the more interesting novel ones that we've seen of late is I'm a proud wearer of the Apple Ultra watch. We've started seeing Apple, who are hiring from Roche, the diagnostic medical company, as well as the CGM manufacturers like Dexcom. And it's pretty certain that this watch in some future iterations is going to be able to take our blood pulse and measure our glucose. I can think of no other reason why Apple is starting to hire from those organizations in those particular people in abundance. I believe there's a million stories like that waiting to be told when you look at people data. And one more interesting thing on this is that wave of people that we saw going into Austin and Boise and Denver to a lesser extent, a lot of them are coming back. So I don't know what's happening down in down or up in those areas, but far too certain to say that it's as much of a sea change as it was when the people arrived. But you are starting to see a little bit of a whiplash. The COVID cities, Nashville being another one, you're starting to see that they're returning the tech centers where they were prior to going to those cities. But all of those are just stories. Like I said, all of those are just stories waiting to be told when people start to can more easily peruse the data.
I think that's fascinating. Here's my last question for you. And I've been in the investment business my whole adult life, and so it's really easy for me to think about how valuable those insights that you're able to provide on human capital, would be for an investor. And I know a bunch of your clients are investors. Think about the future and just being the CEO of a business. I mean, what kind of industries and or the CEO of the future did you see really utilizing what you're doing and what's going to happen from this data grid? I mean, the applications became kind of for everybody, but what are some of the kind of the lowest, most obvious things that you're going to see, from a industry opportunity standpoint, and or you're a great CEO, here are the kind of things I'm going to be doing?
Boy, that is the big question. And I think I'm going to have to answer from the perspective of somebody who wants there to be an easy way for my data to be sort of seamlessly joined with everybody else's data. I believe there's multiple trillions of dollars of efficiency that is waiting for the world's economies to be earned or gained from simply reducing the friction around procurement. What is procurement? It's the buying and the selling of an element, a good, a service. And so much of the operating expenses of every single organization is based on me trying to make sure I'm buying the optimal product or service or input to my product, and me as the salesperson trying to figure out how I work my way into your process so that you buy my product as opposed to the 5 or 6 other like competitors. So I believe more access to better real-time information will almost allow like our respective buying and selling agents to meet out there in the AI ether and say, hey, based on your needs, Ford Motor Company, don't entertain a whole RFP process from all of these folks. I know exactly what your needs are. I know your production line. I know it's like you need this particular commodity. I've negotiated out here with all of the people who've got it. Let's cut the nonsense. And now it's time to do that contract. But just try to imagine the OpEx of every single organization that is the OpEx that I have trying to convince my prospects to buy my product, and then all of the OpEx that my purchasing partner has in trying to decide me as opposed to everybody else. I think that broadly is waste, or at least an opportunity for a lot of efficiency. And if we figure that out, it is literally plenty of statistics to show that 58 cents of every single venture capital dollar of seed and Series A company is spent on customer acquisition costs. 58%. Just please buy my product, not the other guys. It's literally trillions of dollars of opportunity.
The cliche, time is money, is very true. And what you're talking about radically compresses the time equation. So this time dividend that we've talked about before becomes very real, which turns into cost, turns into productivity, turns into all sorts of things that really change the game. So Scott Hamilton, look, it was so great to have the opportunity to speak with you live. The essay you put out was fabulous. I encourage everybody to go to Dash Media. If you didn't see it, please go and check it out and pay attention to Live Data, because they're doing incredibly cool things in the whole human capital world. And I think this data grid is a big idea. So Scott, thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.